Since April, I've been using a Supernote device every day for my journaling, for my brainstorming, and for my personal notes. With the release of the reMarkable Paper Pro Move, I decided that I was going to kick off October, going all in with it and with its big brother, the reMarkable Paper Pro. I didn't make it even 15 days through the month, and I had to stop. And not just stop, but I will be getting rid of both of these devices completely. When the reMarkable Paper Pro Move was released, I jumped in. I went ahead and ordered it, and I got it fairly quickly. And when this little device came out, I was impressed. I made a video about it here, and go check that out if you want to see those first impressions. But the long and short of it is, it left a positive enough first impression that I decided I wanted to use it. I wanted to really dive in. Up until that point, I've been using both the Supernote Manta as well as the Supernote Nomad. There are a lot of reasons, and I'll dive into those more down the road at some point. But they've been working well for me, though there were a few complaints I have. With the reMarkable Move, I decided, hey, let's go ahead and jump in. I'd had the reMarkable Paper Pro since it was released, and I dabbled with it a little bit, but hadn't really given it a fair shake. This felt like a perfect time to do so. Now, what did I want to use these devices for? Well, I use a handwriting system for daily journaling. I take notes during the day. I try and plan things out on a weekly basis. I reflect on my week using a plus minus next system, and I do try and do a brain dump either in the evening or in the morning with to-do lists and things that I want to make sure I get done. It doesn't replace my digital system, but it's a complement to it. Do I use my phone and my other electronic devices that all sync to each other for mostly everything? I do, but there's a certain amount of friction and a certain almost meditative or mindful state that I can get in when I'm handwriting that I don't get with other electronic devices. So that's why I wanted to give these a try. I started out October 1st. I moved my morning journaling over to the reMarkable. I started out using the Paper Pro in the morning. I took the Move with me to work. I was ready to just go in to really give them a try because I figured the only way I was going to know if they would work for me was to truly use them. But you know, here's the thing. 10 days in, and I gave up. There were just too many negatives for me to even push on through and make it to a full 30 days. One of the key things is every one of these types of e-ink devices, they come with compromises. For you to figure out what's going to be best for you, it's a matter of finding which compromises you're willing to make and which ones you aren't. I'm going to go through what didn't work for me and why those compromises could not be overcome, and the amount of friction that it took for me to use these as part of my system was too much to be worth it. But before I do that, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, and if you'd share this with others. It makes a huge difference, especially for a small channel like mine that's just getting going. Now, I don't want to be all negative, so let's talk first about the positives. And as I mentioned in my first impressions, the reMarkable devices are very nicely built. They have a good industrial design that feels premium. They're nice to hold. They're nice to look at. They look good on your desk. The interface is fairly intuitive. It doesn't offer a ton of customization or organization, but it's enough and it's fairly easy to use. And the biggest thing that really made the reMarkable system stand out for me is the speed and the reliability of the sync. It works very quickly, faster than just about anything else I've used, and it really makes it fairly easy to get content on and off of the devices. But for me, that's where the positives end. Let's talk about the negatives and what didn't work for me, and again, why these were compromises I wasn't willing to make. In some ways, the high quality build actually works against them. The reMarkable Paper Pro is 11.8 inches. It's heavy. It feels good, but between the metal and the glass, this thing's actually 81 grams heavier than an 11-inch iPad Pro, even though there really isn't that much difference in the screen size. In many ways for me, the glass screen, this is actually a drawback. What about the reMarkable Paper Pro Move? It's a much smaller form factor. It still is heavier than certainly the Supernote Nomad, but it's smaller, it's narrower, and theoretically, it could fit in a pocket. Could I put this in my pocket? Yes. But most people aren't going to fit it in a pocket. And it's large enough to be awkward. It didn't make sense to put it in a pocket, especially where I already had an almost 7-inch phone. I still had to carry it in a bag. At that point, the size was no longer an actual benefit. Another issue with the Move was the fact that it's a very awkward aspect ratio. Because it's fairly tall but very thin, it was something that writing on it in a portrait orientation where I could easily hold it in one hand felt a little awkward and led to some real weird differences between notes that were taken on the Move and then when they were looked at, viewed, or further edited down the road on the Paper Pro. At the same time, if I turned it to landscape, that's not really a very comfortable way to write unless it's on a desk or a table. And at that point, if it's resting on a desk or a table, I kind of don't care how small it is. In fact, I wish I had more room. I wish I had a bigger device. It just didn't work. It was an odd aspect ratio, an odd thing to hold in my hands, and it wasn't something that I found myself really wanting to use anymore after those initial first few days. Another place where the reMarkable devices kind of lose me is the pencil. Now I have the Special, Pro, Deluxe, whatever. They have a couple different versions, and this is the more expensive Marker Pro. I think that's what it's called. It's well made. It has some nice sort of texture to it, but it feels a little long and a little too thin. In my hand, I didn't like the way it felt. There are a lot of other devices whose styluses are about this same width, and that, for me, is a drawback. One of the biggest advantages of the Supernote devices is their ability to use almost any standard EMR pen. Because of that, as opposed to this little guy, I can use something like a Lamy pen, or I can use a custom-made pen that's much more comfortable in the hands. That's a very personal thing, and for me, it made a huge difference. When I was trying to write for longer amounts of time, a more comfortable pen makes all the difference in the world. And these pens, not comfortable at all. Now let's talk about another big negative for me, and it's something I mentioned in that first look and those first impressions on the Move, and that is the fact that you can't really add your own templates. Again, are there applications that'll let you do that? Yes. Do you have to enter developer mode? Yes. Do you often have to use the terminal to SSH to the device? Yes. Who in their right mind is going to waste time doing that? There are people who love it. Good for them. I want a device that I can easily use quickly, reliably, and if I want to put my own template on there, it should be easy. I was spoiled after months of using Supernote. It was so simple to load up my own stationery, my own templates, build my own things, and then use them going forward. It didn't exist on the reMarkable Paper Pro or Paper Pro Move. While there are templates available on the newly announced and still sort of early reMarkable Methods website, I didn't find a lot of those very good, and you have to be paying for a Connect subscription to have access to those. It was just one more bit of friction that made it so I didn't really enjoy using these. I had to find a lot of workarounds to use things that I'd already been using for months on the Supernote devices. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So physically, I found them a little awkward. The Move, too small. The Pro, almost too heavy. But what about reading? I didn't find it to be a good experience. PDFs look fine, but if they have any color, they're very washed out. Because they're color e-ink, the contrast is less than you get with a black and white device. And because you're dealing with e-ink, you get the inherent weaknesses that come with that. Comparing a full color PDF on this versus something like an iPad Pro, there's no comparison whatsoever. In fact, I made a video comparing these devices as well as a few others to look at things like comics, and well, go check that out because it didn't look good for the reMarkable devices. Can you put EPUBs on them? Yeah, you can. You can put your own EPUBs. But let's walk through and let's kind of see how that looks and compare that to something like a Kindle Scribe because, boy, that's really rough. But let's look at an EPUB. I mentioned the EPUB experience wasn't great. Let's look at one and let's see. Now, the first thing you're going to notice as we go through this is there is so much more flickering and refreshing than we're going to see on a Kindle. We're just going to swipe through pages. I mean, look at that. Look at how much it takes for the text to actually show up. Now, a great advantage, in my opinion, to using e-ink devices or e-readers over a traditional book is the ability to customize it. You can make the font larger, smaller. You can change it if there's something that's easier for you to read. Let's watch what that's like on the reMarkable Paper Pro. So we come up here and we go to our text settings. And we get some sizes and we get 4 fonts to choose from. We get some line spacing and justification. All fairly basic things to have. Let's change a font. That was real-time changing of the font. You saw how long that took. Let's do it again, just to prove that's no fluke. And there we go. That's how long it takes to change. That's unacceptable. Let's compare that to a Kindle Scribe. So here we are with a Kindle Scribe. This is the same book that we were looking at. Watch what happens when we scroll with this device. As we swipe, there's a little bit of a refresh look that almost looks like a page sliding, but it is so much faster. And now for fun. Let's change some of the view options here. Let's change our font. That fast. The honest truth is, I think we went through every single font on the Kindle Scribe in the time it took to change a single font on the reMarkable Paper Pro. For reading, these devices just aren't going to cut it. You're so much better off getting a very inexpensive Kindle or Kobo or anything that's a dedicated e-reader. Reading on the reMarkable Paper Pro is an exercise in frustration. Reading on the reMarkable Paper Move, with its very weird aspect ratio, even worse. But when you get down to it, what was the most important aspect of these devices, for me at least? And that was the writing experience. That's why I want these. I want a digital notebook. I want something that I can carry with me at all times, that has essentially unlimited storage for my notes, that allows me to organize them, to move them around, and isn't me tearing out pieces of paper, putting them in different places. Do I like paper notebooks? I do. Do I have some really nice ones? I do. But that's not what I want. Most of the time I want to use a digital device that gets me close. And I found that in some others. I was hoping to find that in the reMarkable. That was not the case. I truly hated writing on both of these devices. First of all, let's talk about the writing experience. It was almost imperceptible, but I couldn't help but feel that there was more lag in writing on the reMarkable devices than writing on just about any other e-ink thing I tried. It was definitely slower than the Supernote. It was slower than the Viwood's AI paper. It was slower than a Books device, and it was slower than a Kindle. It wasn't a huge difference, but it was definitely there. And as I showed in that first look, when you switch to color, it is huge. There is a flickering, a refresh that has to happen with that made handwriting with that just super grating. I couldn't handle it. Another big issue that I noticed once I was using it regularly was the fact that the strokes didn't seem right. There were times where I was drawing a straight line and on the page or on the screen, it was no longer straight. In looking online, I'm not the only one who's had that issue. That's something that's going on with these, and I don't know what it is, if it's software or hardware, but it hasn't been fixed yet. And knowing that I'm writing something and it doesn't look correct on the page, I mean, that's the whole reason I wanted to get these, was to write on them. If it doesn't do that accurately, what am I doing? Another big knock for the reMarkable devices, and again, not just for me. The screens have a very iffy response when it comes to things like swiping to add a new page or to go through different pages. A lot of times I would swipe and then swipe and then swipe. Maybe on the third, fourth, or even fifth time it would actually change the page. Look, this is a bad enough thing that it's known, and people will tell you, who are defenders of reMarkable, that you're swiping too hard or too fast. You have to do it just right. Sure. Is it okay to have a little bit of finickiness when it comes to that sort of thing? I'll forgive him that. But the fact that regularly I was finding that if I was lucky, 50% of the time it seemed to respond appropriately to my gesture, that's not acceptable. But let's get to what did it feel like to write on these. Now, this is an extremely personal thing. Some people, they want the feeling, the scratchiness, the bite of a pencil on a piece of paper. I haven't written with pencils for years. I'm a pen person. I have been. I prefer the feel of a pen on a pad of paper. There's a little give. It glides across the page more smoothly. I'm a rollerball fan. That's what I'm looking for when I'm writing, and that is not what this is. There was both a palpable and audible scratchiness to the surfaces. For some people, that's a plus, and if that's the case, great. Then they're going to be happy with these devices. But as someone who has exclusively been using pens for decades, that feeling, that sensation, and that almost grittiness just didn't work for me. And that's where that glass screen actually becomes a liability. There's no give, there's no flex, and the hard plastic on the glass screen, it really felt like, best way I could describe it is you've got a pencil on a single sheet of paper on a hard desk. Again, if you like that, you're going to like this. But me, when I write, I have 2 leather desk mats on my desk specifically so that when I put a piece of paper down and write on it, I get a little bit of give. It feels better to me. That is not what these were. And writing on these was nails on the chalkboard. So let's look at what is it like to write on the device a little bit. I don't know how well this is going to work, but I'm going to try and get some audio of the sound of what it's like. So let's see if we can pick that up so you can hear the kind of scratchiness. And again, for some people, this is a plus. For me, it was a huge minus. In black and white, it's responsive. It looks pretty good. It's really when we switch to those colors that the whole thing just becomes a mess. Just like on the move, we get the ghosting, we get the refresh, we get that flickering that happens, and that alone is enough to make it feel like there's more lag than there actually is. Now, one of the tricky things is, as I mentioned, the stroke inconsistency was, well, inconsistent. So much of the time, it looked good. However, you'll notice, maybe you can see that period. Maybe you can't. What I found was that when making small little things, putting a tittle on an I, putting a period or a comma or an apostrophe, a lot of times it hardly even showed up. And that's actually something that's very unique to the reMarkable devices. I did not see that on the Viwoods. I didn't see that especially on the Supernote. They felt much more responsive, and that wasn't an issue that we had to deal with. So at the end of 10 days, that was it. This was not a long-term tool for me. I found the experience of writing on it just too unpleasant. There was too much friction to do the things that not only I wanted to do, but that I had done quite easily on other devices. The big reMarkable Paper Pro was too heavy to carry around easily. The small one was just too big to do anything other than stick it in a bag. And if I'm putting it in a bag, then I might as well take something that I'm going to enjoy and maybe gives me a little bit more room to write on. I know that there's a lot of people who like the reMarkable devices, and that's great. As I said at the beginning, All of these devices require that you make compromises. That's what they are. Their stripped back, limited nature of them, as well as the inherent pros and cons of e-ink as a technology, require that you make compromises. However, for me, the compromises of the reMarkable devices, it just didn't work. The writing feeling was very unpleasant. They're not great for reading. The colors are washed out. The backlight, which I didn't even really get into, was too dim to be usable in a lot of situations, even with the recent software update that allowed you to go brighter. All in all, I just didn't enjoy it, and I had no way I could see myself using it any longer than just those 10 days that I did. It's time to sell these, and it's time to not look back.